Hi, troopers. Welcome to the first ever Spoof Troupe podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be talking about anything related to comedy. On today's episode, we're talking about different types of comedy, primarily film, sitcom, stand-up comedy, and sketch comedy. I'm your host, Charles Dewandeler. If you've ever watched our YouTube channel, Spoof Troupe, I'm usually the guy behind the camera, though I do make cameos from time to time. Joining me to my left is David Lautman. David, in our recent video, was Robin. You've probably seen him in several Robin sketches. And what other sketches have you done, David?
Oh, man. Gosh, so many.
The top
I
ones.
Can't think of. Well, yeah, okay, so Spider-Man, Avengers, like playing Captain America, like Wolverine. I did a really fun Wolverine sketch. I guess those are the top. Yeah.
And next to David, we have Paul Green, who is a stand-up comedian and has also appeared in some sketches, including the most recent one, You Were Batman. You have also been Red Skull. And how would people recognize you in our sketches?
They wouldn't. Batman, I'm wearing a mask. Thor, I had a gigantic wig. I am a bald man by trade, and so the wig would throw people off. And then with Red Skull, my entire face was painted blood red. That would actually probably still be the most recognizable, though, because it's still my face.
So just turn the color off on your phone or your computer, and then you can see what you look like in black and
You
white.
click it back to black and white, be like, that's Paul Green.
I don't know.
No, I don't
might be a little darker than you actually
Yeah.
are. Don't
Wow.
do that, guys, because otherwise you might think we're using blackface and we don't.
And we're
No, it's
not.
red. It's red face.
I do not condone blackface. I'm Paul Green.
All right.
But thanks
next
for
to
that
Paul.
commentary, Steve.
Next to Paul, we have Noel. Noel, in one of our most recent videos you were in was the Lion King music video. You've also been in Ghostbusters parody. What videos have you been in? How do people recognize you?
I'm the black one.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
She's in perpetual
I'm
blackface.
It's not just you.
But
We
if
have
you
other
turn the
cast members.
TV to black
David says
and white,
there is another one. There is another
another-
one.
or
There's
another
LB.
two.
There might be two. No,
Nick,
just kidding. Nick has done one appearance.
yeah.
That's right. I'm just kidding. You would see.
Are we really doing this, guys?
Are we going to list everybody who's in every video?
Nope, just the black ones, Charles.
All right. The other voice you're hearing right now, who we have not introduced, is Steve Saunders.
Here.
He was actually in our first ever Spoof Troupe video, and he's been in a lot of them. You've probably seen him in Social Justice League as Aquaman. That's probably the easiest to remember. What else have you been in?
Oh, there's a whole playlist on our YouTube. Just go check that out. It's got my name on it, Steve Saunders.
Steve Saunders playlist on the Spoof Troupe
In
channel.
fact, everybody's got his playlist for the most part.
Well,
for the most part.
Mo-
Paul's
the,
on his way.
The recurring
Paul's
people,
almost got
the
one.
recurring people who've been in the most sketches have playlists. Yes,
I do not have a playlist.
I can make one for
My
you.
name is Paul Green.
I feel like, do I have a playlist?
Paul does not.
I don't
don't
think
know.
I have a playlist
Playlist.
either, and there's at least 4.
Okay, by the time people are able to hear this podcast, I will have made playlists for both of you.
Just
All right.
don't play my playlist in black and white.
And if you haven't, what does the audience get?
They get to watch
Oh.
videos for free on YouTube.
Wow, that's a great deal.
That's a good deal.
'Cause you
And
know
support
what?
our Patreon. Oh, wait. We don't have. We got to set up a Patreon. So
By
people
the
can
time
donate,
you
yeah.
hear this, Charles will have set up a Patreon.
Patreon.
Okay, I did not say that, so that's not going to happen.
I'm Charles Dewandeler, and I endorse Patreon to the point where I'm going to set one up. I'm Charles Dewandeler.
That wasn't me. Okay, so let's talk about comedy. Before film and television had really taken off, we had something in this country called vaudeville, which is where a lot of comedians got their start. Let's talk about stand-up comedy and vaudeville. Do you guys know what vaudeville is?
Charles, I was barely around in the 80s.
Have
I
you
didn't
seen
even know what they
Have you seen any movies about vaudeville?
No.
One of my favorite comedy troupes started in vaudeville, which would be the Marx Brothers.
They're
They
great.
started doing
Okay.
movies, but they were vaudeville actors, and then brought their vaudeville act to the silver screen as it were.
Another person who didn't necessarily start in vaudeville, but he worked in vaudeville, was Bob Hope. And I want to bring him up so we can talk about stand-up comedy with Paul Green here. Bob Hope started in radio,
In Cleveland.
and he also worked in hit television movies and TV. He hosted the Oscars and all that kind of stuff. But he also worked in vaudeville. And I think this is where the early days where comedians were able to hone kind of a form of stand-up comedy. Would you say that, Paul?
Yeah, I watched a documentary on Bob Hope, and he was really the inventor of the TV monologue. You know, like what you see all the late night hosts do now, like start a show with a monologue. Because if you think about it, that's kind of an interesting phenomenon because television, has been around, I guess 80 years now? 80,
Since the 50s.
Yeah, about since the 50s, right? So somebody just standing up and telling jokes about what's going on, and Bob Hope was really the purveyor of that and started that tradition of like, oh, I'm just going to stand here and tell these jokes. So that was really interesting to watch that and to watch his career progress. And then, you know, obviously he spearheaded that. And then you see all of these other comedians come along and start doing that sort of structure of just standing up and telling jokes.
A lot of those early vaudeville acts later did TV and film, but I want to talk about Bob Hope because I think he's one of the people who really crossed over between all different mediums. So vaudeville, radio, TV, film, hosting the Oscars, stand-up. Like he was a comedian that did all of it.
Yeah, I mean, he was out there supporting the troops too, like entertaining the troops, the GIs, you know, keeping the spirits up as they fight battles across the pond. Well, not the pond, but you know what I'm saying.
By
So-
pond, you mean ocean.
An
Yeah,
ocean?
I mean
I
the
was like,
ocean.
is that a
But
pond?
battle was across the pond. I think we're the ones who crossed the pond, innit?
Yeah, he also did some stand-up over by the hills in Colorado. You know, those little hills.
Not mountains. They're not mountains or anything.
By the
like
grassy knoll. Yeah,
From now on, we're going to refer to every geographic.
I'm a big fan of the work that he did across the canyon down in Arizona.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was good stuff.
So, Paul, you probably know more about stand-up comedy than I do. From the
likely.
1950s to the 1970s, do you think stand-up comedy really changed that much between Bob Hope and, let's say, the days of Richard Pryor in the 70s? I think stand-up comedy, more or less,
They're the exact
Until-
same thing, Charles.
until the 1970s, stand-up comedy was kind of like, it was all clean. You might have innuendos, but you didn't have like really any swearing or anything. And then it seems like the way people did stand-up was the same up until about the 1970s. Would you say that, or there were a lot of differences before that?
The interesting thing is, I'll talk to a lot of people about Richard Pryor, and they'll say things like, "Oh, you know, I like comedians who are truth tellers or who just, you know, like tell it what it is." And it's like, yeah, you're talking Richard Pryor later in life. Go watch Richard Pryor when he was on television. You know, like early in his days. I mean, he's doing regular funny jokes. Same with like George Carlin, right? Oh, he was such a truth teller and stuff. It's like, yeah, when he was 70, you know what I mean? And
To be fair, he looked like he was 70 when he was starting.
yeah, this
so
is
you
true.
can't
That is a
tell.
good point. But yeah, but like seriously though, like if you go watch George Carlin's inaugural SNL thing. I think he did stand up actually on the first episode of SNL. You can
I don't
fact
think he
check
did
me on
any
that.
sketches. We did stand-up like
Yeah,
3 times.
no, yeah, he just did stand up, and it's like, you know, he's not dropping the truth bombs like he did later in life, you know. So I think there is, I think there is a place to just like, I'm just gonna tell jokes, you know, like I don't have to be edgy, I don't have to like shake up the system, you know what I mean? I don't have to like put truth in people's face. Like I can just go up and tell jokes. And a lot of those comedians who maybe later in their career and were established and got to a point that were like, screw it, I'm going to say what I want to say, like later in their careers, and then they did, and they were still brilliant, and they kind of had an adjustment in their, or a resurgence or whatever. But yeah, when they started out, they're just telling jokes like any other joke, you know.
In the early days of Hollywood, there was the Hays Commission, things like that they had a lot of really strict rules that forced them to be implicit instead of explicit. And that's really the difference. They were still really dirty jokes, but you really had to think about them. And it was an art to get it around the censors. And we don't have that nowadays. Nowadays, you can get up and say whatever you want. And so as a result, we've lost the implicit nature of comedy.
Yeah, I think in the old days, you had to be an adult to understand what the innuendos and the double entendres and everything meant so that you could tell those jokes or have those jokes on TV, and kids wouldn't understand what was happening. So it was considered clean, but the adults knew what was happening.
It's like the
Nowadays,
Toy Story approach, you know. You watch Toy Story,
Disney,
yeah.
Disney started that.
It's like the joke is working on 2 levels, enough for like kids to laugh because they think it's funny, but then the adults know like, oh, that's a whole other thing.
What do you think it was that changed? I know the change happened somewhere in the 70s. Do you think there was any factor that caused that?
Culture.
Let's just say culture and like everything switched then in the 70s.
Yeah, that was the hippie movement. You have the counterculture movement, the sexual revolution movement, we don't trust our government anymore.
Anti-war, everything.
You won't silence us. We're going to say what we want to say, and we're going to be who we want to be, and all of that. So, comedy is always going to be like all art. Like all art is a mirror of what's going on in the culture. And so, when people kind of started, breaking out of their shells and pushing back against the authority and the establishment and all of that, of course, the comedy is going to reflect that and change.
I blame the marijuanas, Charles.
It's it's those people who do the marijuana.
They don't smoke. The ones that just
Do
do
it.
marijuana.
So do you think this process of doing stand-up comedy is the same as it was back in Bob Hope's day, or is it different today?
I don't know when open mic started, but once you started getting like the comedy clubs, like the Comedy Store, which I think opened like in the 70s and stuff, I think that's when stand-up actually started to be like its own art form of like, oh, we're going to have a venue that is strictly for this new art form of stand-up comedy. And then that started, all of the culture and, systems around doing stand-up and doing open mics and stuff. But like Jerry Seinfeld, he doesn't talk about doing open mics. He's just like, oh yeah, I just would, wherever it was, the Comedy Cellar, whatever you go in New York. And he's like, yeah, I would just go and do sets every night. It's like, yeah, that doesn't, or like do shows. It's like, yeah, you can't do that today.
There's
like,
a lot more people trying to do it.
Yeah, it's so saturated. So to get like quality stage time in LA is really difficult. Like all of those open mics I'm talking about are pay to play. Like you pay $5 every open mic to get that stage time. Like you don't just show up. And that's like, you do that for a long time. And then the next step is at least somebody will put you on your show that you don't have to pay to be there, or you don't have to bring an audience. Because usually if you're like, the next step is people will put you on your show, but it's like, but you have to get 5 people in the audience who've bought tickets and are buying drinks. Then they'll give you 5 minutes of time. So that's
so they check the head count before.
Oh, they check the head count. Yeah, because I did one of those at the Comedy Store, and all my friends bailed on me. And the guy wouldn't let me on stage unless I paid for their tickets in cash. So I literally went to an ATM and pulled out like $45 in cash and paid the guy in cash so I could go do 5 minutes of comedy at the Comedy Store on the main stage. Otherwise, he wasn't going to let me on stage because he doesn't need me,
And that was just because you wanted to try out your material in front of that room versus the other places you've done it?
Well, yeah, I mean, because you can always do your stuff in front of an open mic, but open mics usually 98% of the audience, 98% of the time are other comedians, and comedians have a different sense of humor. It's like trying to do magic in front of magicians. It's like,
it's not an honest account.
It's not an honest account.
Audience would take. Yeah.
So ultimately, you want to put your material in front of paying audiences who aren't comedians to really test your material. And the good thing about that is you usually find you're a lot funnier, than you thought you were, because comedians aren't going to laugh at you very much. You really have to put a lot of work in to get a room of comedians to laugh at you. But that's the thing.
Unless you're their friend and they fake laugh at you.
Yes, which also doesn't help.
So that doesn't help either, though, because now you're setting up yourself for...
You're setting up your friend for failure.
Yeah, because now you're going to go to another open mic or another set place, and they're not going to find that funny. And you're like, oh.
Really, to start making money, it's like you have to be good enough to where when you're on the show, people would pay tickets to come see you, because that's really your value. And if people aren't buying tickets to see you, it's like...
they're not going to pay you. Whoever owns the club isn't going to pay you to be there if you're not bringing in money.
Yeah, because they have to pay to turn the lights on. Either that, or you look at different like road opportunities, like casinos, corporate gigs, cruise ships, college market. Like they all have budgets as well, but you've got to convince a casino booker or a cruise ship booker to say like, oh yeah, we'll pay you to come do a 45-minute show every single night for a cruise ship. And that's actually where I'm at right now, is I'm starting to try to get those gigs. So that's where I'm at in my journey.
You get that.
How can people follow you on social media if they want to see you perform somewhere? You can let them
know. I'm at paulgreencomedy.com, and my social media is all Paul Green Comedy. Paul Green just spelled normal, no funky E's or anything. And
2 funky E's in the middle.
2 funky E's in the middle of green, but that is the typical place where you would expect E's in green. I have my show calendar, all my performances on my website, and I do daily motivational memes. If you want motivation that's obvious, you can check out my daily memes. Today's memes was if you're struggling, you can always reach out to someone unless your struggle is quicksand and you're alone. No dumb motivational meme by Paul Green.
Let's talk about film now. In the early days of film, some of the comedians started in vaudeville and became actors in film, like Charlie Chaplin. So I grew up watching a lot of his stuff, not just because we have the same first name. One of the things I liked about Charlie Chaplin is that he eventually wrote, directed, and starred in and did the music in his own films. I want to talk about the early days of film because it's different than it is today. At least to me, it seems different than it is today. And I want to know what movies inspired you guys when you were younger. Did you watch any silent films? And if you did, who were the ones that you watched?
First off, how old are you? Like no. We didn't grow up watching.
In 1870, George Hesterson was a comedian in a small pub in Maryland. What did you think of him?
I was born after the invention of sound.
Me too. And color TV. Like.
So I grew up in the days of VHS tapes. And some of the VHS tapes we had at home. Some of the VHS tapes we had at home were Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy.
Shut up! They're like
Marx
actually
Brothers.
on like VHSs. I grew up in the DVD era.
Fancy.
Which for you younger audience members, a DVD is like a digital download on an actual disc that you would put into.
So should I
an
take
open
it you
slot
guys
in the
haven't
computer.
seen, nobody else here has seen silent films except for me.
No, I mean,
I've
we've
seen
all
them. Like
seen it.
I
We've
think
all
we've
seen it,
seen them.
which is-
I mean,
not
everyone
like-
with Facebook
But-
has seen a silent film.
but you don't-
have to click on it.
you
to
don't
get
know
it
the
sound.
names of the
How
people
many
who
times
starred
I've
in them.
done that? No, I
Okay,
don't
then
know
let's
about
move
that.
on to 1927 when they started putting sound in film. Have any of you seen any of the old talkies? But when it was people talking, but it was the early days of film. Like it's still black. A lot of them were still black and white. Some of them were color, but a lot of them
Oh,
were
I
still
thought you were
black and
talking
white.
about the
This is
Dorito
before we were
chips.
born. Has anybody seen any of these movies?
No, I thought you were talking about the Dorito chips.
Doritos.
The Takis.
You don't know what a talkie is?
Takis?
No, the Takis. That's what I thought. I thought it was a misspelling.
When they started
I
putting.
feel like we should apologize to
Oh
the
my god,
audience.
that's so bad. My bad, guys.
So once technology got, I think I should back up and explain what I'm talking about.
Explain what it is.
When technology got good enough that they could actually record microphones on stage with the actors and then marry that audio from that microphone to the film that was in the film camera, they figured out, okay, we can record, we don't need to use silent film with the title screens anymore. We can actually have the actor on set say the lines, and people watching in the movie theater will be able to hear them say what they're saying.
And that was called Takis.
They called that talkies.
Call them
you can actually-
talkies, eh? Because you can talk right on the screen.
That's a pretty good impression. I like that.
Yeah, good transatlantic.
All right, so
That's cool.
let's go to the 1950s now.
Okay.
This is also before we were born, but 1950s.
We've all seen
No, we've
those
seen
movies.
these things.
No, yeah.
Okay,
Are there-
I know what you're talking about.
Okay,
but it's
then
just
are there any
not like an encyclopedic.
No.
are there
knowledge of
any
it.
comedy?
Duck Soup. Marx Brothers.
Okay,
Possibly the greatest movie ever made.
what happens in that one?
That is the one in
Because
which
I don't remember if
there
I've
are
seen it. I may
there are
have, but-
two fictional countries that end up going to war, and Groucho Marx's character, I don't remember what his name is, but it's very silly. Basically comes in, and he's supposed to like save this country as their president, and just completely screws the whole thing up. It's so many puns in that movie. That at the Opera, which is another of the Marx Brothers films.
All right,
if
now
you
I was
enjoy
gonna-
puns, it's
I was going to throw in there, and you guys can disagree with me if you can think of anything that I'm not thinking of. But I think the early days of film before talkies took over were very visual, and all the comedy was mostly visual gags. So it'd be like Charlie Chaplin kicking a police officer in the butt, or people falling downstairs, people slapping each other. Were the Marx
Stooges?
Brothers the ones that
Yeah,
always
see, the
punched
Three
and kicked each
Stooges
other?
would
Three
be-
Stooges, yeah.
Yeah.
That was always the funny, like, when they would make.
So
which it's interesting. The Three Stooges, they made a movie of the Three Stooges a few years ago, and people were like, "This is obscene." What they don't realize is that we were talking earlier, where everything was implicit. The Three Stooges was like the Jackass of the 1930s. Like the stuff they were doing was very edgy.
That's a good comparison.
Very inappropriate.
You're talking about Jackass, the MTV
Yeah.
thing, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good
Our
comparison.
generation, you
The
know,
actual
MTV,
literal
like,
donkeys.
what?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that
funny.
whether or not you're talking about donkeys or Jackass, yeah.
I actually got to take off speaking of comedy. I have a comedy class today.
Come on.
Wonderful talking with all of you.
Thank you, Paul.
Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. You're
Thank you for
amazing.
sharing your
Love
knowledge
you.
of what it's like doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
I did it about a half a dozen times, but I decided that it was a large time. You have to devote a lot of time to do stand-up comedy.
You made the right choice quitting. Just like
He's like, one person down, more room for
grind.
me.
It is a grind. So
Have a good one. So in the 1950s, something that really changed comedy for the way we see it today was television. Because once television came around, we had what we now know of as sitcoms, which is situation comedy, which is a half-hour TV show. In the early days, in the 50s, it was filmed in front of a live studio audience, and it was like doing a live play for an audience, but you'd have 3 or 4 film cameras there taping it live, and then it would go on TV later. Have any of you guys seen I Love Lucy?
Yes, yes.
I love who?
Probably
You
the
guys
most
can't see
syndicated
his
show in the
face,
history
but
of
he
television.
was nervous saying that to us.
Literally, my car is named after Lucille Ball.
Your car?
My car is named
Really?
Lucy, yeah.
Oh, okay. Is it red?
No.
Oh.
It's blue, like her eyes, and also has the same personality
Stop being
as
a little
Lucy.
weird.
Look,
weird.
I'm a big fan.
So in the early days of I Love Lucy, for anybody listening, she had red hair, but the original episodes were in black and white. But she would appear in magazine covers and magazines and stuff. And when people saw her in the magazine, she had red hair, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's Lucy! Oh my God!" So, but then eventually her show was in color, and you could see her red hair on TV. That's why I asked if your car was red.
It's not.
We got that the first time. It's blue. I get it. Okay. Were there any other sitcoms you guys watched from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s besides I Love
Oh, yeah.
Lucy?
What about like?
What's like your inspiration? What when you're watching reruns as a kid? Like what? Like
on Nick at Night? Because let's be real, we all watch these on Nick at Night.
I saw stuff. On
Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Well, what about the guy where he's
Dick
always
Van
like?
Dyke.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Dick. I was like, whatever his name is. My grandparents always used to watch him all the time. I'd watch that. No, but there's the other one. Like, what you talking about, Willis? I always watch that. What was
Is that
Come on, like we all
The
watch
Carters
that.
or something?
No,
Webster?
the guy's like, what you talking about, Willis? I'll find out because we can Google.
We'll just make people wait while we look stuff up. All right. Well, something that happened in the 70s is we had a show that came on TV called MASH. And MASH was based on a movie, MASH, that had come out a few years earlier. It was kind of a hit movie. So
Different Strokes. Sorry.
Different Strokes.
Okay, sorry.
So they ended up making a TV show called MASH. And instead of filming it in front of a live studio audience, they filmed it on location. And because they filmed it on location, there was no audience there. It wouldn't be practical to bring an audience out while they were filming this.
And also, since they were shooting in Korea, they didn't understand
No,
what they were
they
saying
were filming.
anyway.
They were filming by one of the hiking trails that we go to sometimes. So, some of what they filmed was by the Bat Cave. If you guys have ever been by the Bat Cave,
Yeah,
the back.
Yeah. So
I just want to point out that as soon as you started talking about MASH, I don't know if the audience
You
can
fell
hear
asleep.
this, but a helicopter went overhead, and I just
how
find that
ironic.
so apropos.
I paid for that. Yeah.
Well done.
That was a really good one.
So the thing with MASH was it was not filmed in front of a live studio audience, but whoever was in charge of that show, I don't know if it was the network executives or who, thought that people watching the show at home wouldn't get the jokes unless they put in a fake laugh track. So anytime there was like a joke, there was supposed to be a punchline, they would edit in a fake laugh track. And that way people watching it at home would have the same amount of laughs that they see in a regular I Love Lucy or any other show.
That makes sense.
Were there any other shows that you remember that had a fake laugh track that you watched as a kid?
Not back then, but like
Like reruns.
I feel
in
like
Like
that
Nick at
time?
Night.
Yeah,
They-
and like at that time, or are you talking about like when we watched like Full House and all that?
Well, Full House was a live studio audience.
Yes,
so
I
even
guess
though
that's not
but it was
added on.
also a fake laugh track.
Laugh
They
track
tell
added.
you when to
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah.
They
Well,
literally do.
all right, so let me clarify. When you have a sitcom in front of a live studio audience, like anything where everything is shot in like a living room, there is an audience there, that is laughing. And then they can also add more laughter to it in post. But that's different than a show like MASH where there's no audience and they just manufacture the laughs in post and it's like completely fake. So there's a difference between having laughter live and then like enhancing it. And then there's a difference between like not having it all and just putting it in. It doesn't even belong in there.
You guys think of any?
Yeah, I think, so this is like it might be kind of weird, but I used to watch a show called The Patty Duke Show.
Yes.
Yeah?
I do know that. My grandparents
Really?
would watch
Yeah, see,
that.
I was just
I
going
don't
to say,
know
like,
that one.
it's such a grand...
Yeah, it's such a... Yeah,
It's a
I'm from the
grandpa move
Midwest,
right
let me
there,
tell you. Yes.
But I believe that show had a laugh track. Now, I don't know if it was like a live studio audience or if it was, you know, a fake laugh track like we're talking about.
Yeah,
But I remember that show was awesome. Like, you know, I think the actor, like Patty Duke, she played herself
Yes.
because she's like a, was it like a fraternal twin or
Yeah,
something?
I have not
Identical.
heard this forever.
She's like an identical twin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a great show. And but sorry. Regardless of whether or not the laugh track was real or fake, it worked.
Yeah.
And the show was awesome.
And you would
And
laugh
I'm,
at
kinda,
every...
I'm surprised that more people don't know about
Actually,
it. Yeah.
now I kind of just want to look this up and see what it would be like watching it now to me. Like,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I think it still plays.
And that would have been in that time.
I've never seen that, so you'll have to send me a link or something so I can see what you're talking about.
Really? Yeah.
But like MASH used to be like in rerun. When I was younger, I used to always watch reruns of shows, especially like when I got home from school. This was back in the days before Cartoon Network. So I would come home from school and from 3 to 5, they would show cartoons. So we would watch.
Before the
Wait,
days of Cartoon
You
Network.
knew before. Yeah, I just you
So,
realized that I remember. Have you never had
nowadays,
Cartoon Network?
nowadays, if you want to watch cartoons during the day, you have to watch it on Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. Right? If you watch like a local channel, you're watching Ellen or another talk show or news.
So not like your PB.
So like when I came home from school, I would turn on like one of the local channels, like not cable, but like a local channel, and they would have cartoons running from 3 to 5. So I would see like Ninja Turtles or
that's no
G.I. Joe, like all that kind of stuff. From 5 to 8, certain channels would have news and certain channels would have sitcom reruns. So that's how I saw a lot of these sitcoms was from the hours of 5 to 8. So like MASH and like all those other shows that I used to
Chips
watch.
in that time? No.
Chips?
Yeah.
Was Chips a sitcom?
I don't know.
No,
I
that's
thought
a
it was
police drama,
Was it?
I
Okay,
think.
why did I feel like it was kind of comedy? Never mind. I guess I was watching it then.
I'd have to look it up. I'm not
Well, I know
sure.
they recently did a movie with Dax Shepard,
Or
and that
maybe
was a
that's-
comedy.
Okay,
Oh.
maybe that's
Yeah,
what
that
I was
movie-
Yeah,
thinking
so I
about that.
think the original
Actually,
show
it is.
may have been
It was a comedy. Yeah.
Yeah,
with
I
the
think so.
with them on the motorcycles.
We'll have to look it up. I want to say it was
a
like
good
a
movie. It was a
typical
good
like
movie, by the way, for people listening.
I was thinking that Chips was like the A-Team and those other shows. They're like a 1-hour show with like action built into it. But
Yeah, I think this was like an action comedy, but
so
Yeah,
typically
the
didn't
movie
really
was
watch
a
much
comedy.
Chips.
Just say.
typically when there's a TV show on
Yeah, it
prime
was a lightly
time,
comedy.
Noel is fact checking
I
everything
am. I
you
am
say.
such a liar.
typically when you watch shows on TV, they're either a 1-hour drama or they're a half-hour comedy.
Sure.
So there's not really there's not really like an hour-long comedy and there's not a half-hour drama. It's
Unless
either,
Judd Apatow's producing it, in which case it's
you don't
somewhere
know what it's going to
between.
be. It can be anything. So let's talk about. It's not the same as a sitcom, but it's sketch comedy. So if we go back to vaudeville and they would perform on stage kind of like these sketch performances, then you see in the early days of short films, some of the short films maybe could be considered sketches. Then we really see sketches more when we get TV in like, let's say the 60s when we have Laugh-In and these other sketch comedy shows. So I'm just going to throw out a few names of sketch comedy shows so that people at home can understand like what is a sketch comedy show. So we got Laugh-In, we've got the Flip Wilson Show, we've got Red Skelton. In 1975, we get Saturday Night Live, also known as SNL. Later on, we have In Living Color, Dave Chappelle, Mad TV, Key and Peele. These are all examples of shows where you're watching a show where it's almost completely sketches. You'll see, it's not like watching a late night talk show like Jimmy Fallon or Johnny Carson where it's like stand up, then some talking, and then they do a sketch, and then they do an interview with a guest. It's not like one sketch in a show. You're watching like an entire half hour, hour long, whatever show that's all sketches. What sketch shows did you guys watch, and did that inspire you to want to make your own sketches one day?
Oh yeah, for me, big time Mad TV. I loved Mad TV for some reason growing up. Like the different characters. Oh my gosh, yeah. Like, I mean, I loved SNL and all that, but I did feel like you had to be a little bit older to kind of understand that Mad TV was like you just understand the characters. Like it was like to the T.
I never thought of that. Mad TV appealed more to younger audiences than SNL.
Yeah.
By far.
I mean, in Living Color before Mad TV.
Yeah, that too.
And then I mean,
Yeah,
when I was first starting in comedy, it was like not in but getting into comedy I was in like high school and stuff, and I'd watch reruns of SNL with the Chris Farley, Adam Sandler days, and watch Whitest Kids You Know. That one was probably
That was Canadian, right?
No, Kids in the Hall was Canadian. That was another great one. Obviously, Monty Python's Flying Circus. I don't know how that wasn't in your list. It's like the quintessential.
That was BBC, right?
Beginning, yeah. And SCTV, Second City TV, is another phenomenal
What's that?
one.
I don't remember.
If you haven't seen SCTV, you need to go Google it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it was originally Second City Toronto, I think, is the one who did it. But like every Christopher Guest film, the entire cast comes out of SCTV for the most part.
So
yeah, I would say the
what was your
same
favorite,
for
David?
me in Living Color, SNL, and then I would even go into like the sketches when like Conan would do sketches and stuff like back in the day. That kind of stuff. I would watch
the
that
side
religiously, like every night with my friends. And if we weren't there, we would record it on a VHS tape and then watch it
See,
later.
he knows.
Yeah.
He knows what VHS is.
He's just trying to plug in to be like that, but really, did he know? You know?
Yeah.
Oh man,
Noel's got me.
Yeah.
He's got me pegged.
Has seriously no one said all that yet?
I was thinking all that, but that's
Oh, yeah, that's
later
right.
after though, because all
Well,
that would be
right now we can talk about any
Okay,
sketch
then
comedy.
Literally,
all that
all this
was
stuff.
literally everything to me.
For me, all this stuff was at the same time. So.
Well, yeah, because we were
Because
older.
we were born
I
after
know.
most of this stuff was
I'm not
made.
trying
So
to-
Yeah, so you're watching
Constantly.
reruns of
But
Monty
he's
Python,
right.
and then you were
Right.
watching new episodes of all
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, but they would
And
all
I'm like,
run
why did
on
Monty
that
Python-
same channel though, because you
Oh,
could
'cause it was
watch
Nick at Night or something?
Yep,
Okay.
and you would watch that. But oh my gosh, the Amanda Show was
I remember
life for me.
My
Oh my
brother
God,
had a
she
huge
would be
crush
like
on
Lucy,
Amanda.
Like like my friends in there. Yeah, I loved it. That was live for me.
Amanda was the spin-off from all that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I loved it though. I loved it so much. Oh, and then Keenan and Cal, Orange Soda.
that was a sitcom though.
Oh, was that? Okay. But that was from all that. That's their sketch.
Oh, yeah, it was
yes,
like a
that
spin-off.
Or was
Yeah,
it
it's like a
concurrent?
sitcom
No,
spin-off
that would be
from...
off of theirs.
Yeah, they kind of took a sketch from that and spun it off into a sitcom, yeah. I mean, you can totally... One of the things I like about sketch is that it's short, so if the sketch isn't funny, it's like over.
Yeah.
But I also like that you can have a sketch that people really like and spin it into something else.
Yeah, like your Good
So-
Burgers and putting all these big movies.
Yeah,
after.
Good Burger,
That's where
but
all
I'm
based
thinking
off
more
of
like SNL because I'm an SNL guy. Like ever since Chris Farley days, I think I've seen every episode of SNL from then on. I've also seen some of the older ones too, but I don't think I've
I
seen
agree.
every one of the old ones.
I'm with you.
But
Chris
from the
Farley.
90s on, like even now, I set my DVR and I tape it every week.
Without thinking about it, 5 seconds. What's your favorite sketch of all time? 5, 4.
The first one that popped in my head was Sweaty Balls, but
That's-
that's
yeah,
not necessarily
there
my
you go.
favorite. That's just the first one that popped in my head.
Well, yeah. I mean, if
Alright,
you're gonna,
actually, mine is the Will Ferrell one in the hot tub scene.
that one's fantastic.
I
yeah.
couldn't, and they were totally amping each other up. I was like, that's the best.
What does he do in that one?
They're they're a couple enjoying vacation.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, and they're trying not to break the whole time.
And the other people are like disgusted by
Yeah,
how they're
yeah.
like,
Lava.
The easiest, simplest game, the funniest thing, and also the Native American cheerleaders. Native American, and he'd go.
I don't
underneath.
remember that
They were
one.
the chess players, and they were the chess cheerleaders. And it
I remember
was
the
Will
other
Ferrell.
cheerleaders.
Yeah, no, it was Will Ferrell and blanking her name right now.
Cheerio
But
Terry.
You talking about the Spartans?
yeah, Spartans.
Yeah.
But they were they were for chess players. They were the cheerleaders of chess players.
So it wasn't them.
And then at the end, he was like Native Americans.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but were they the Spartans? I don't remember
Yeah.
the name.
But you're not talking about Will Ferrell and Cheerio Terry. You're talking about somebody else?
It's Will Ferrell, and I don't remember the girl's name, so that could be.
Is it Sherry Terry or Molly Shannon?
We'll just
Oh
figure
my
it
God.
out.
No, Molly Shannon is the one that she was like she would play the girl who was in
Yeah.
the all girls school, and then she would like put her fingers in her armpit and smell it.
Hits.
But Sherry O'Terry was the cheerleader.
Okay.
She was the short one when
Yeah.
Will Ferrell was really tall. And
Yeah.
it was like
So which one is that?
Sherry O'Terry.
Yes,
Yeah.
she's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I love that one.
I thought that's who you were talking about, but I'm like,
would-
Chess, what are you talking about,
I did
Chess?
that for like my parents. They have a video of me, like me and my friend reenacted it. I come underneath their
Oh my
legs.
god.
Loved it, you guys.
When I was a kid, I did a
we
reenactment.
gotta attach that video into the
I
show
would
notes.
Be
Right.
mortified. I would be so mortified.
Share it
That
on
probably was a
Instagram or
VHS,
something.
Actually.
Really?
When I was a kid, me and my sister redid, or we kind of did like a reenactment of Wayne's World.
Oh,
And I
yeah,
have that
yeah,
online
loved
somewhere.
I
Wayne's
think I
World.
saw that actually.
Yeah, I've shared it a few times.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's link that one too.
Okay, that would be funny.
So my 5 seconds to decide. what
5,
I-
4,
You-
3. You've had
Already
way
did-
more
no,
than
no,
5
no, no.
seconds.
You're
Okay,
cheating,
wait,
because that was
no.
like 10 minutes ago.
I know, but 10 minutes ago.
He's been on
something-
Google the entire time.
Yeah, he's figuring them all
I actually
out.
don't even know where my phone is. I may have left
He
it in my
stole
car.
mine. Where
No,
did
but
mine
10
go?
minutes ago when we said that, mine was Fire Marshal Bill. Like just
Yeah.
any kind of, yeah.
Wait,
Oh,
wait.
That's
wait,
the
but
first thing
that's
that jumped
that's
in my mind.
In Living Color. I thought we were talking about SNL.
No, it's just sketches.
No,
Oh,
he
I
just
thought you were
said
talking
sketch.
about mine with
Okay.
him.
He
I
just
thought you were
said
talking
sketch.
about
Yeah,
SNL.
yeah.
Gotcha.
That
That's
was
your
just the first thing
stipulation.
to pop in my head,
Okay.
just seeing.
Oh,
I just saw his face like.
Which one
contorted
was that one?
as- It's the one where
Jim Carrey.
Exactly. Yeah, Steve
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
You guys can see that, right? Steve
I'm
is
doing
an
a
impression.
bang-on impression of Fire Marshal.
It's Jim Carrey,
right,
who's like
yeah.
a really
Fire
bad
Marshal.
fire marshal.
Like where he like messes
And he
up.
kinda
his
touched
powder.
my
Okay, I'm a fire marshal.
Oh, okay, that one.
He kind of talks like that. Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking it's not the one that he's like throws the powder everywhere.
No, he comes in and burns everyone's
Yeah, everybody
houses, schools,
pretty
Oh
much
yeah, it is
whatever.
that one.
Yeah,
Okay,
everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
exactly.
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular about sketch that interests you guys? I can say from my perspective, what I like about sketch, I've always liked sketch comedy shows, like I said, SNL, ever since the mid 90s. I've always watched it. And I've also always watched those other shows too, like in Living Color. I remember being a huge Jim Carrey fan back in the day. But what I like about sketch is that when we're doing it for, say, YouTube, we can do it short pieces. And sketch is really meant to be like short pieces like that. So that's part of the reason why I like it. Also, sketch can be really silly and you don't need a big budget. You don't need like huge visual effects and stuff, because even if you watch SNL or these other sketch shows, sometimes it's funny how bad the green screen is, or like they're just wearing like cheesy costumes. Like it's not meant to be like a $200 million budget movie. So that's part of the reason why I like sketch. What is it about sketch that you guys like or are drawn to or enjoy?
Well, as a millennial, my
Like what?
attention span is nothing. I blame Sesame Street. And so, like, the longest sketches are like 5-6 minutes long.
Oh my gosh, that's so long.
Well, yeah.
That's like so
look at
long
look
for a
at
sketch.
look at old school SNL, and by old school I mean the 90s. Some of those are really long, but they're
sitcoms.
great. But like, it's a different. You don't have to have a full year's worth of ideas for a sketch. You have an idea for a bit that can be played, like Noel was talking about. You play a game of a sketch, and you stretch that out for 3 minutes, and then that's all it has to be. But yeah, I think a sketch is also a great way to workshop a character. If you have a character that you really like to play and you're not sure how that's going to go with an audience, you do it for a sketch, see what happens, as opposed to doing it for a 90-minute screenplay. And then if it doesn't work, you've just wasted a lot of people's time.
And there's no investment with sketch.
Yeah, it's
Right.
very minimal investment as opposed to doing like a feature or something like that.
Right.
And
Which
you're watching.
Yeah,
you
which
know.
that kind of touches on. I think what draws me to it is just the accessibility. Like, I think it's anybody with a camera, even an iPhone. I mean, everybody's got smartphones nowadays that some of them can even shoot in 4K.
Yeah, you
so
got
there's
an
like
11 out there? My gosh.
right.
Like,
Yeah. How many lenses are on there?
dude, for
Like
real?
3, 4?
3?
Right.
Just wait
I
till
mean-
the 12.
Yes. So, but you know, anybody can do it, and what's great about it, I mean, there's pros and cons about that. I mean, for that reason, YouTube is just flooded with so much stuff. And when we put out Star Wars sketches in particular, that's when you realize, like, oh, wow, everybody and their mom makes a Star Wars sketch. So let's not do that. Let's try and do something more creative, right? But yeah, I think that's what's so great about sketch is that anybody can do it. Not everybody can just be like, you know what, I'm gonna do a sitcom today. Here's a script. Let's get it going. Like, I mean, that takes, like, I mean.
And to do a
whole
sitcom
team.
right is like you're talking minimum $1 million, but really the ones you see on TV are $2 million.
Right.
Well,
To
it's
do
not
one
even-
half hour in a week.
Yeah, and it's not just about the money of that though. It's like the dimensionals of it, right? Like a sitcom is based off of like multiple characters and their multiple sketches, pretty much.
And how long does it take to develop a sitcom? I mean, we
That's
can
why
do a
it's like-
sketch in like a day if we had to.
Quickly.
Yeah,
You know?
if we really
Sitcom
wanted
is
to.
like
Yeah.
all
we
these
really wanted to.
dimensions, like how you're gonna follow them out. But I love sitcom, so like I'm not gonna. I mean, I love sketch, but I love a good sitcom. 90s preferably.
They did make them
I don't
different
know
in the
why
90s.
he was different. Yeah.
Oh, well, that is one thing that I forgot to mention before when we were talking about sitcoms. So, starting from Malcolm in the Middle on, they started making
I know.
sitcoms.
Now he comes to our generation. Yeah.
They started making sitcoms where there is no audience, there is no fake laughter, there's not meant to be fake laughter. The jokes just happen, and it's up to the audience at home if they want to laugh or not. And Malcolm in the Middle really started that. And nowadays, the show that I really got hooked on when it first came out was The Office. I think I got hooked maybe
Yeah.
like season 3 or 4, and then I had to rewatch all the old episodes.
Before that, you watched Friends.
Because
though,
say
right?
Friends would
But
be
yeah,
the
before that, I
original.
watched
Yeah,
all
yeah.
sitcoms where it was an audience.
Oh yeah.
And then The Office, I think, was the first one that I really got hooked on where it was like, there's no laughter, but I'm sitting there like laughing out loud at home because I'm like, that is so funny. And you don't need the audience to tell you that it's a joke. Like in the old days of
Yeah.
sitcoms,
Yeah.
they thought whoever were the decision makers, like the executives or whoever, thought that the audience at home needed to hear laughter from the audience to know when the joke just happened. So the audience at home could go, oh, that was a joke. Oh, I get it. Because they figured if they didn't have that, people would think they're watching a drama.
Totally.
But now that we have, because of Malcolm in the Middle, and then you have all these other shows like Modern Family and everything else, they're without an audience. So the audience at home is just expected to know when they're joking.
Was Malcolm in the Middle supposed to be a comedy? Because they got the guy from
Yeah, it's
Breaking
a
Bad.
Yes,
He's
it
a
was.
very serious actor.
No, it was supposed to be a comedy, and he's very right
He's
that
joking.
it was. I know that it was going to be a first single cam. Like they didn't
It was
even
shot
think
like
it was
a
gonna
film,
Be
yeah.
good. Yeah, they didn't think it was even going to go anywhere because
So
I guess
Malcolm
I
in the-
didn't know it was because they thought that you couldn't laugh without a laugh track.
Over the years, I would
I mean,
say
it makes sense, but
movie studios and TV networks seem to think that the audience is dumber than it really is. And there are some people in the audience who are really dumb.
no, I
Let's
get. It. I
face
just
it.
didn't
Wait a
know.
second.
But-
Frankie Muniz was in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, he was breaking.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I didn't watch Breaking Bad. Was he really in it?
He's talking about Bryan
He's the
Cranston.
titular character.
Oh, shit, stop it, you idiot.
Um,
Oh my gosh, I really thought.
But Breaking Bad was shot like a film, whereas The Office and Modern Family and some of those other ones are actually shot like a fake documentary.
Yeah,
So that's
documentary style.
that's actually two completely different styles of shooting, which we're not going to get into today because I don't want to make it too complicated. But we can talk about that on another episode.
Is this all going to be on the test?
I knew it.
I'll make a test that I'll give to you by the time people can listen to this podcast.
And if you don't make that test, what does the audience get?
They can watch free videos on YouTube on our channel.
That is like such a great deal. Just did that all.
So today I wanted to go over
Down
kind
the
of like
the pond.
the major different kinds of comedy, like film and sitcom and sketch and stand up, to kind of give like a broad view of how they're all kind of similar and also kind of different. And what I'd like to do is record more podcasts in the future talking about more comedy, your favorite movies, TV shows, comedians. I'd like to have you guys back and also bring in other people from Spoof Troupe videos and stuff and try and get some different perspectives. Before we leave, any final thoughts, and how can people follow you on social media and reach out to you? I know you guys are all really good at responding to comments like on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that, but just let people know if they want to follow you, where they can follow you at. Let's start with David.
Yeah, I'll respond to comments, but if it gets like too into the weeds and you're like, I probably won't respond to that stuff. But yeah,
I will only respond to comments that are like 17 emojis.
yeah.
So how can people follow you, David, on social media?
Social media. So davidlautman.com, and then all my social media is at David Lautman, Lautman.
Nice. Steve, how can people get a hold of you?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Steve Saunders, Saunders 17. As well.
I didn't know you're 17.
No, that was
Did you
my.
create that when you were 17?
No, it was my. There were 16 other Steve Saunderses. So.
Really?
1? Nope. 2? Nope. All right. No.
Man, you just kept going forward.
I got there
At
eventually.
12, you were like, I'm not going to give
Yep.
up at this point.
No, 17 was my number for basketball and soccer in high school. So I.
Oh, they gave you the
kept
same
it
number
going.
for both?
Well, I asked for it.
Ah.
He's kind of a good soccer player, so that's probably why.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. And then.
But you
can-
chose 17 the very first time?
The-
Or that was given
It
to you,
shows
17.
you.
So they gave me 17 for soccer, and then when we chose in basketball, I chose 17 because I wanted the continuous. Yeah.
You wanted to save money
I-
and only have to buy one jersey.
I knew that Instagram would be a thing one day, and
Yeah, I got the jersey.
yeah. And then you can also follow at Bonus Time Movie on Twitter and at bonus underscore time underscore the underscore
Okay.
movie.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Jeez.
You lost me at all the underscores.
Right.
Can they just
There's
search
a lot
it?
of
Why
underscores.
Can they
you
just
do
search
that?
bonus time and
Yeah,
it'll come up in
just
search results?
Bonus
Can they
Time
Google
the
it?
movie
Can they just
is
Google
a movie I'm in development for that is very, very funny. It's
And
Bonus
notice-
Time, the colon cancer comedy.
And notice he said bonus, not boner, so don't search boner time.
Bonus. If you search the other one, I'm not liable for what you find.
Noel's so confused.
Yeah, it's like,
Why would anybody
we
think
have
that?
boner? I have no idea why anyone would.
All right, Noel, how can people follow you?
At Instagram, Facebook, at Noel Gibson. That's Noel, like Christmas. Do not put 2 L's in an E, please. It drives me nuts.
Noel, why is your name a Y?
It's not a lie.
Were you born on Christmas?
I was born on Christmas. I know, right? So it's,
You know how you should spell your name?
like Noel
No.
Gibson, Gibson. Follow me there.
No, you should spell it JKMN.
I don't know what that means.
You know I'm trying to read that right now, right? Just kidding.
Because then there would be Noel.
No L in there. Okay. So, anyways, moving on, everybody. Follow me there. You can catch my Woka sketch team every second Wednesday of the month at UCB. Come laugh. A lot of funny people. All women. I love these men, but it's all women.
You can follow me at Charles Dewandeler, or go to my website, charlesdewandeler.com. Make sure you put Deler at the end. The common misspelling is people like to put Dler. I don't know why.
Oh. Why do people just butcher names?
Because they don't like to look up things before they type them. They just like to
Because
make
some
it up
of our
with their
names are
imagination.
Y's, Noel.
No, they're not lies. And another pet peeve of mine is if you Facebook someone or Instagram them and their name is right there, why do you spell their name incorrectly?
Exactly.
Like, that is like ridiculous.
Or if I
to
send
me.
you an email and my name is in the email, why would you respond and say, hey, I didn't know how to spell your name? It was in the email I sent
I'm
you.
with you. I don't get that.
Why isn't your name 1L?
Okay, you guys can't see what's happening between me and Steve right now, but there's a lot happening. There's a lot of facial expressions happening. There's 1 L, okay? It's
She knows
Noel.
I'm right. She knows I'm
It's
right.
not. It's born just like Jesus. Same day. You're welcome. And come on, won't he do it? Okay.
All right, any final
Historical
thoughts?
evidence that he
Any
wasn't
final
born on
thoughts? We can
December
wrap it up.
It's really not about that, but anyways, it's a special day.
So follow us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, check out our website, spooftroupe.com. If you want to buy our merchandise, we have merchandise on there and we got more to come. So feel free to spend some money if you want.
Yeah, let's take a second to thank our sponsor, 7-Eleven.
We don't have a
I was
sponsor.
like, did we get
This
a sponsor?
episode-
I wish I
Wait,
could
you guys
see our
didn't get the
faces.
Slurpee?
I
was about to be like,
free Slurpee.
where the heck is my free Slurpee?
Just for clarification, we do not have a sponsor. So
Yes.
we are doing this for free right now.
Yeah.
So
But
we
if
hope
you'd
you've
like to
enjoyed.
sponsor us.
All right. Thanks, guys.